In this example, we're going to introduce a new method for solving quadratic equations. Up to this point, the only method we have talked about so far has been factoring. In part A, we're going to solve the equation x squared equals 25 using what we call the square root property. To use the square root property, we simply need to think about what is the question we are actually being asked. We're being asked to solve x squared equals 25. What I'm really being asked is, what number could I square to get 25? I know that 5 squared equals 25, so that must mean 5 is one of the solutions to this equation. But I also know that if I square negative 5 in parentheses, I'll also get 25. So if x squared equals 25, I know either x equals 5 or x equals negative 5. It's important to remember that all positive real numbers have two square roots, both a positive and a negative, and that is the basis for the square root property. When you're asked to solve the equation x squared equals a positive real number, there are going to be two options: the positive square root of that number and the negative square root of a number. Let's complete part C before we return to part B, and formally state the square root property. The square root property is stated as this: if k is a positive real number and x squared equals k, then x either equals root k or the opposite of root k. Again, the basis of the square root property is simply logic. There are two numbers that I could square, both a positive and a negative, that would give me the k. It's important to recognize that if we were to solve something by factoring or using any other method of solving quadratic equations, we should arrive at the same answer. So in part B, if I was to solve x squared equals 25 by factoring, we would start out by setting up x squared equals 25, and using factoring, we know that we first have to start by setting the equation equal to 0. So I would subtract 25 from both sides of the equation. And then I would factor. X squared minus 25, well, x squared minus 25 is a binomial, it's a difference of squares, and this would factor as x is in the front, 5 is in the back of each binomial, and so it would factor as x plus 5 and x minus 5. And then using factoring, we then end up using the zero product theorem. So then either x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0. X plus 5 equals 0, well, if we subtract 5 from both sides, we get x equals negative 5. And if we solve x minus 5 equals 0, we get x equals positive 5. So you'll notice we arrive at the same two answers. It's whether we use factoring or we simply logically think through what are the possibilities. In either case, though, we would want to finish off with a conclusion. At a minimum, we could state our solution set. And the solution set, whether we solved it by the square root property or by factoring, would be the set 5, negative 5. So that is the square root property. If x squared equals k, then x is either equal to the positive root k or the negative root k.